Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today was definitely an inside day. It was a day of contemplation. It was a day of just hanging out with myself, regrouping in that energy that we disperse out there. It's funny even saying that, I could go back 10, 15 years in the past and look at the person that I was. And I always considered myself a very genuine person. I always felt that it worked for me. I was never comfortable in lying because lying was something I'd always been around my entire life within my own family, within strangers, and people who would be, I don't know, maybe were embarrassed a little bit in having their truth be known to kind of that idea, like lots of times I would feel bad about myself. My dad and my grandmother would always say, Cindy, it's what's in the inside that counts, right? And because of those lifelines that we grab onto, that we quite often will grab onto those because there's nothing else, because we're looking for a little bit of happiness, a little bit of good cheer to come into our lives, make us feel that maybe we do have something to offer. Maybe it is true that the inside counts more than the outside. I had an experience in my late 20s. If you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that I was a very big girl. I had gotten myself up to my 300s. 311 pounds was the highest that I had ever gotten in my weight. In my family, it is a very big coping mechanism, something that was kind of acceptable for some, acceptable, not acceptable to others. Meaning, I was the fat kid, right? I was the one that was used as the example to my sisters, and put me in a position where I have to take some of that responsibility from my sisters who have eating issues and weight issues, because they would always say, oh, do you want to grow up to look like Cindy, to be as big as Cindy, right? To be as useless as Cindy. And they were always using me that as an example. And it really did a job on me, in all honesty. But it always made me feel better, right? Because I knew I was loved by my father. I knew I was loved by my grandmother. That when they said this one thing, right? It's what's in the inside that counts, not what's on the outside. And because I couldn't do anything about the outside, I would be doing my darndest to do everything that I could on the inside. That be that person that people at the very least could trust was telling the truth, right? That one person that you could rely on when you were feeling bad, that I could cheer you up or do something, because I knew the people around me. It was in my hypervigilance to know in the moment what somebody needed. And that was always appreciated. I always knew that it was appreciated. I always thought I made friends through that. And I think honestly, I did. You could say people used me because of that trait, but I don't think so. We all want to be around people that make us feel good. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because when you want to be around somebody that makes you feel good, that says something about that person, right? It does. And I appreciated that. And I appreciated that I never was a big liar. There were moments when I got myself in big doo doo and I felt I didn't have no choice but to cover my bases. But I was a terrible liar. People would know right away when I was lying. And for the most part, what I had learned to do was to kind of dance around subjects, to kind of hint at what I needed or what hurt me or what I didn't appreciate. But as I grew older, I come to understand that in being genuine and just being yourself, that there wasn't that necessity to lie. There wasn't that necessity to cover your butt. And because I didn't feel that I didn't have anything to contribute, right? Except for what was in the inside. And because of those dynamic relationships and those crazy interactions that on occasion, more than often than not, I would have that would beat on me a little bit, that I found my own way. Even though I wasn't woke to any of these ideas, I found my own way to maneuver in this world. And in doing that, it was through being genuine. When I was genuine, there wasn't a need to lie. When I was genuine and told the truth and came right out and told people what bothered me, or even not understanding what boundaries were, just say, I don't like it when you talk about this. I don't like it when you do this. If you hang out with me, you've got to be nice to other people that are around me, because I would always get myself in these situations where, being genuine, I would be very protective of the people that were around me. And quite often, that again would get me into some doo doo. So, in being genuine, I found it necessary to vocalize, right? And it worked for me. And it also made me feel comfortable. Hello, Eugene. How are you doing tonight? I'm doing super good too. Thank you so much for popping in. But lose my track there and what I was saying. I was saying that I was very protective around the people that I was around. But when I fell into or recognized or bumped into, however it came across my path, I'm not quite sure. But I latched on to it because I recognized it in my life. And that was mindset. And I recognized it because it was something that was really relevant in my father's life. It was relevant in a way that he brought his household up in that. Like us kids grew up, like we didn't know what mindset was. He never discussed his beliefs or his understandings. He never even set major rules because he believed in free choice, even for his kids, right? And being on one end in an extreme, two extremes, right? My mother loved Jesus. My dad was spiritual, and I didn't understand what spirituality was either, to tell you the truth. I only recognized it when I started waking up to some of my own ideas. And, you know, they had this understanding between them in free choice, right? That if the kids wanted to be baptized, to be Christians or Protestants or whatever denomination my mother was in the moment, she loved Jesus, that was fine. But if they wanted to follow what he was doing or make a different choice altogether, that would be perfectly fine and up to us kids. It kind of put us in a position where he raised a bunch of feral children, right? And and it was in our choices that each one of us got to move along. That's not to say that free choice wasn't manipulated or influenced, or what I call sheep herded, to get us to move in a different direction, because my dad was a big believer in majority rules. And, he would take a vote within the family, and there were six of us, mom, dad, and the four girls, right? There would be six of us in the boat, and he would position who was going to take the boat, um, like the who's going to go first, next, whatever, right? And last, depending on where he wanted that boat to go. I didn't quite understand it in the moment, but for the most part, I just voted for whatever way my dad wanted to go, because my dad was lots of fun, full of adventures, lots of good times, right? And it worked in the family until it didn't work, because it kind of made us all individuals, independent in a way. And it's funny that I say that, because I was a very codependent, but I was a very reliable, knowledgeable, hyper vigilant, so afraid I was going to get in trouble if I didn't make things work the way they wanted them to work, right? But in the same token, I have to say, I thought I was independent only because, right, I took care of things. But I only took care of things because of that reciprocation of being taken care of myself, right? I'm smiling because it's really neat to understand this now, to understand that dynamic family that I grew up in, right? But I learned to be genuine. And it's not to say that being genuine didn't hurt me. It most definitely did, because you automatically understood that there was a boundary line, right? That we were going to be good. We were going to be good coworkers. We were going to be good friends. We were going to be getting along in our familial relationships, that everything was good as long as you, right, didn't say bad people or bad things about the people that were around me, wouldn't say bad things about me, or trigger me in a way, because I was very easy to trigger because of those dynamic relationships that I grew up in. And if you were close to me, and because I was genuine, right, you would know instantly where my weaknesses were, what you could say to me, what you could do to me to get my blood going, or get me to feel jealous, right? Or get me to feel left out, or get me to feel betrayed, or, right? So many things would put me in a moment of feeling like I didn't matter. And it was a daily thing, it wasn't a once in a while thing, it was constantly throughout my life. When I stumbled onto mindset, and I'm grateful, and like I said, I have no idea. Like, I go back and I go, when did it start, right? Because I'm not quite sure. I knew it was sometime in that span of when my marriage fell apart, and when I started on YouTube as a YouTube creator. But the specific moment, no. But I only recognized it because I recognized my father's beliefs in it. Like I said, he never discussed his beliefs, right? He had interests that I thought were kind of quirky, but my dad was quirky, right? He was his own person. and he was an amazing man, and I thought, had beautiful traits, and he never had that anger in him. Never. Well, he probably did, but you would never know it because he had such good control over it for the most part until he was triggered, right? My dad got triggered too. My mother knew how to trigger my father. But I recognized it, and because I was grasping at lifelines, that I moved into it deeper in my understandings because I didn't have any faith, right? Not to say I was faithless, like I was a bad person or anything like that, but I always considered myself like an agnostic, right? I knew something was out there, right? I had my own experiences. I knew something was out there, but what that something was, I had no idea, right? And I didn't really understand that there was any um, access to that because I never really, well, like I said, I've had some experiences, but those experiences were just spontaneous. I don't even know how they manifested in my life, but having those conversations, or what you would call praying, or searching out the answers. And again, this is an age of AI learning that we're in right now. All these answers are out there, all these topics are out there to be had, right? But when I was growing up, right? No, it wasn't. The only thing that I knew was the Sunday school and all those different Christian denominations, and that my mother attended, and she would drag us along. And of course, I had an uncle who was a traveling pastor. His job was to go and get the attendance up in different churches, and it didn't matter what the denomination was, whether it was a black gospel church or when it was Pentecostal or Jehovah Witness. I'm trying to think about Protestant, evangelist, like we did them all. But in actuality, I have to think that, our family was Protestant. Like I knew that just because of the way mom talked about her history and stuff. Like I knew there was a lot of Protestant in that. But my uncle, I believe, was an evangelist, right? But he was a traveling pastor, and his job was to go and build the attendance in these churches. And once the attendance was built up, then he would move on to the next church. So I experienced a lot of different denominations, even during the course of a year, let alone just in my childhood. By the time I was 12 or 13 years old, church was something in the past, right? Again, having free choice, I decided that church wasn't for me, right? And I was also working by that age, so I really didn't have a lot of time in between taking care of my sisters and working, that I didn't have time for this allotted space that I could utilize in going to movies or to the beach or whatever else that I wanted to do. But to get back to this idea about being genuine and how it served me really well, because if it was something where people would consistently um, disregard what I was asking for in those relationships, because I would give what they needed, but what I needed was just in keeping things non confrontational, right? Don't yell at me. Don't yell at my friends or the people that I surround with, right? Don't try and hit anybody. Don't say anything mean, right? And they were pretty simple. But if you crossed those, if you did mean things, if you were sneakity, if you were consistently lying, and lying was something I didn't like the line because I could read the line. I knew a lie, and lots of times I would have to pretend that I didn't know, and I just like, oh, they're telling another story, right? And because I needed my friends, or I thought I needed my friends, I would just go along with the stories that were being told. But I found for myself, if I didn't lie, I didn't have to cover my tracks. And it was pretty of an amazing feeling because, I have liars within my own family, and they're constantly covering their butts, right? What did I say last time? Who did I say that to? Right? And it's hard to keep track of lies, and then your lies are built on top of lies, and then it was such a wonderful trait that I carried it on right into my adulthood. I didn't wake up to any of these ideas until well into my 50s. I'm going to be 65 this year, right? But well into my 50s. And then when I really got deep into the mindset, I got to recognize what I didn't get right in my genuineness. And that was the lesson of discernment, right? Who I could be genuine with. What could I reveal about myself without it being used as ammo against me or against others, right? That discernment to look at somebody and truly feel them out, right? Because I didn't want it to invade privacy. My hypervigilant was always looking up for my safety in the moment. But once I loved you, once I welcomed you into the fold, once you had proven that you weren't going to yell at me and yell at my friends, like we were good, right? But I didn't understand truly the sneakiness, right? That idea of pretending to be a friend, but not really be a friend. That's where I learned the lesson of betrayal, because you're so committed to a relationship. You can't believe somebody would hurt you like that. So you don't even think about it. It's not even a brain fart. And then when somebody actually does hurt you in that, I'm going to say magnificent way, because there are lessons in having that kind of pain set into you, because that pain strips you of that relationship, right? Because that's betrayal, and that was the biggest of the big for me, was to be able to get past betrayal. I did get chances, because for me, having friends was everything. But betrayal was a big one. And usually, once that betrayal set in, I usually moved on. It might have taken a little bit of time, maybe a few weeks or a few months, but I would look for that excuse or that opportunity to be busy or involved in something else or someone else, that I would drift away from these people. Right? I always wanted to relinquish a relationship in good terms, all my relationships in good terms, right? But this discernment was a big lesson for me, because in learning that lesson, I learned not to give it all away, right? I learned that the conversations, the insights, the understandings, those emotions, those bits of ammo that would be considered by somebody else's ammo would be utilized against me. And that was a big lesson for me, because I felt ungenuine. I felt like I wasn't being honest with people. I felt like I couldn't say what I wanted to say. I couldn't do what I wanted to do because somebody was going to get upset or somebody was going to think that I didn't like them or they weren't going to like what I was doing and was going to let me have it. And again, I was non confrontational in that. And of course, right, people might think I'm a little bit kooky. See how I smile about that? Because I readily accept that I am a unique, right? That I am a bit of a strange bird. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I'm online constantly. And some of my favorite teachers out there, some of my favorite characters, from some of my favorite thought leadership out there are unique characters, are strange birds, right? And in a way, I would have to say, maybe a little bit off, right? But for what's important for me, I get that, right? I receive that. And, in my discernment, it becomes a little bit problem because I receive so much because these people are so brave. They just spew it all without letting without worrying what people are going to think about them or say about them or whether or not they're going to stick around or they're going to lose their viewership. And for myself, because I am a realist, right? Of course, I have these experiences and these understandings and my quirkiness, right? I do have that. But I am a realist, and my interactions are with real human beings, right? Real human beings. And it's not to say that I wouldn't make these people, right? These beautiful human souls as friends in my own life, but they're not in my surroundings in this moment, right? My interactions are with, right? My few friends and my family. And I have to use discernment around them, right? Because they'll think I'm right off the rocker, or like my sister would phrase it, Cindy, stop preaching at me, right? I don't even have a denomination, but she considers it preaching at her. But it's just mindset, right? And it's just in the fact that it works so well, it fits so well into my life. And it is a very realistic understanding that can branch off to any religious idea or spiritual idea or right, it doesn't matter, it could be atheist or agnostic or just a realist in general, that it can be utilized as something that we could all use because it teaches such wonderful values that make it so that we can interact with different people, right? I feel bad that my genuineness now has this frosted glass over it, right? I'm still the person that I am, but at the same time, I'm very much recognizing uh, who I'm serving, number one, right? And I understand that the people that I'm serving might not necessarily be here. They might stumble across my content, right? They might meet me in the streets. I met somebody at a bus stop yesterday, and right, that immediate connection and the feeling in the departure of that small interaction that we had was absolutely beautiful, right? And I know it impacted, right? But it was real, right? It was something, it didn't matter about religious ideas, political ideas. It didn't talk about genders or, you know, things that people might consider as off or kooky, right? And I think that that's what I love so much about what I'm sitting in when it comes to mindset, because it's something that we can all utilize. It doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what ideas you sit in. It's just a respectful way to be able to get along with each other in a world where we find it so difficult sometimes to get along with each other, right? And I love values. I love boundaries, right? I love being genuine, but I am practicing discernment. It's not like it's always locked up in a bird cage, right? Just to be pulled out every once in a while, right? I still come across people in my path where I can sit down and have these conversations. I try, right? Yeah, I hope you guys recognize that I try to bring it across so that there are people who are, um, what's the word, resonating with my content, might recognize this in me and recognize it in themselves. And because they recognize it in me, and because I'm on social media, because I have my platform, that it gives them permission, just even in their everyday life, to practice, right? Because we are who we surround ourselves with. And if you surround yourself with me, right? You know my values, you know my boundaries, you know how this channel and these live shows and podcasts are set up, right? It's set up in a way that it's welcoming to everybody, right? Everybody. I'm a true believer that it takes all kinds to make the world. That's why I'm so adamant that if you're with me, that you're kind to everybody around me. And I'm straight up in that, right? When I use discernment, I'm not crossing that one off the list just because it's going to make somebody uncomfortable, right? If you're saying nasty things about gay people around me, I have to say something. I'm going to shut you down because if you're my friend and I'm going to spend time with you, this is not the kind of things that I want to hear. And these are not the kind of people that I want to be around. But because you are a part of my life, because we do have this relationship, if I could tell you this right off the hop in a genuine, in a kind, in a realistic manner, you at the very least will understand where I stand, right? Otherwise, after a month or two, I will slowly pull myself away from that relationship in a kind way so that when we do meet up again on the sidewalks, right, that we can stop and say hello without those hard feelings. But at the very least, you'll understand why. But at the same time, if you appreciate the relationship that we have in the moment, you'll appreciate, right, my mission statement. I only have two, right? I have lots of things I live by, but I have two mission statements, right? It takes all kinds to make the world. It truly does. It is in the diversity that we are going to learn to better get along with each other. We're warring and is going to end. And we can still have disagreements and debate and disagree, right? And not believe in what somebody is saying. But at the very least, in our relationships, that we can be kind in how we maneuver and dance around those subjects with a little bit of discernment, right? Which is the kindness and the respect of somebody else's beliefs, somebody else's way of living. And my other mission statement being, right? Life is what happens to you while you're making other plans, right? Not to Woisy me all through life. It's a good mix of good and bad, right? And so, when you're going through a hard time, right? You're in our crew, you're going to get enveloped by the crew, and it's going to help to lift you in those heavy times, right? And in the same for each one of the people that I come across, that I surround myself in my life, including here on my platform, that I can be that example for others, right? That it can be done. And, it has been a crazy, crazy decade for myself, to be all honest in that. But if you've been with me for any length of time, you know there have been some joyous, fun, right? Amazing, wondrous, confusing, scary, frustrating moments. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But that's life, isn't it? Right? That's life. And I believe that this understanding of evolution in that movement forward, it's not just the light that's moving forward, right? It's the dark moving forward too, right? It's the light in their darknesses and the darknesses in their light, possibly touching the light for the very first time, right? That's the turnaround. That's the understanding that if you hang out with me, we wish for everybody, right? Because there is no pure good or pure evil, right? There's just that understanding, right? We are all just only human. And in our next stage of evolution, we're going to be a little bit of both and a little bit better in understanding that, which might give us an opportunity to have a little bit of tolerance for people who are a little bit different than us or a lot different from us, right? It's only packaging, right? It's only the packaging. And we just got to be getting a little bit better at, I don't know, following some values that kind of work for everybody and not being all scattered, right? In doing our own thing. And that's a hard thing to do when there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different religious ideas and spiritual ideas, and political ideas. And you know how those political ideas rub each other like sandpaper, right? But there are solutions out there. We are finding them. We're moving in that tolerance. I think quite often we have gotten it right and we are quite accepting in things that we might not have been so accepting in even 50 years ago, right? And that's a good thing, right? And that makes it so maybe somebody might want to try a little bit harder, right? Now that they feel comfortable in their own skin, right? Cindy's feeling a little bit more comfortable in her skin, and the people who are hanging out with me are feeling a little bit more comfortable in their skin, right? That maybe we can find that common ground, right? Those common values. Just inch it a little bit further, stretch it a little bit further, right? That makes it so that we can get to that state where we can appreciate the uniqueness in everybody. There we go. That's what I've got for you tonight, you guys. Let's grab a card. I stayed home today, sat in the air conditioner, wearing the heat wave just like everybody else. Tomorrow we're supposed to have thunderstorms. Supposed to. Can't get the weather forecasts right. So I'm not putting any bets on that. I'm not much of a gambler anymore anyway, but yeah, some days I think that it's going to rain all day and nothing goes on. Sometimes I just got to trust my own judgment. Look at the window and say, nice blue skies. It's going to be nice today. Okay, you guys, if you've never hung out with me before, 54 powerful words. Each word is relevant in my life, and I think for the most part, relevant in everybody's life. Of course, our perspectives, each one of our perspectives are going to be different, but when I pull a card, it's the first perspective that comes to my mind, whether it's an experience, whether it's an understanding, whether it was an adventure I had at some point, you know, these deep seated beliefs that we acquire during the course of our life, we have to be willing to expand. And that's why every time I pull a card, and I pull that card numerous times, I take on a different perspective, but it's always the first thing that comes to my mind. Okay, you guys, let's get into it for a couple of minutes. Maybe it'll be pertinent to the conversation. Maybe not. We'll go off in a different direction. Look at that, you guys. Experience paired with attention offers up gifts. The first thing that came to my mind is having the experience of somebody who is different than you, right? Somebody who might be the total opposite of you, right? Visually, physically, right? Mentally, emotionally. Like you look at them, you go, oh my goodness, right? And you sit there and you have a conversation. And just like that conversation that I had, she was a little Iranian lady, right? She didn't have, she had her bus pass, but her bus pass was expired, and she didn't know where to get some money, to get some change, to get on the bus. And I didn't have any money. I just had my bank card with me, so I couldn't help her. But I knew there was a couple of stores up the street, but she needed to get to her appointment right away. She couldn't miss her bus. I said, tell the bus driver, right? The bus driver will understand. Sometimes you have to be embarrassed. Yes, it's embarrassing to say, sorry, I don't have money, but can I put extra money in the receiver, right, on the way home, and just be embarrassed by the ask. The bus drivers are really nice, right? Our bus drivers are amazing, right? We really do have some good bus drivers, and but just be honest and say I'm really sorry, right? My transfer expired. And she says, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I says, about getting out of your comfort zone and asking. I says, if you don't want to wait for the bus driver, right? There's a few people standing here in the station. You could go and ask one of them, like you asked me for a little bit of help. You can ask them. And there was a Chinese gentleman, I'm not going to say Chinese, an Asian gentleman on the platform there. And she got up, walked to him, and I could tell right away that he was going to help her out. And he took off his backpack and he rummaged through his backpack and found some change and gave it to her and even said, "Don't worry about it." And she says, "No, no, take my $5." So we dug for some more change, right, to make up for the $5. And she was so happy. And she came back and sat with me and told me a little bit about the place where she lived and how much she appreciated the conversation that she had with me. And I says, "Yeah, it wasn't that hard, was it? Yes, it's a little bit embarrassing. You don't know if somebody's going to be mean to you or something. But every time you try, right? And it's okay. You get a little bit braver and it makes it so the next time you try, it's not as scary." And that was such a gift for me when she stood up. She says, "Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure meeting you. You were so kind. And thank you so much. I so enjoyed the conversation." And we talked to her for maybe a total of 5 or 6 minutes, right? But we made that impact on each other, not just me making an impact in her. It was a real conversation with real insights, helpful insights, and it was done in kindness. And it was a gift, experience paired with attention offers up gifts, right? It's about paying attention to the person in front of you, right? Paying attention to the things that bother us, right? Because I could read in, there was some embarrassment in there, some shyness, maybe a little bit of fear, right? Because she was scarfed and you could tell she was Middle Eastern, and maybe there was a little bit of fear there that somebody might not be so kind to her. And we sat there and we talked about how amazing the people are in Manitoba. I said, "I'm from British Columbia. When I came to Manitoba, it was the first thing I recognized were how amazing the people were here, right?" And I says, "It's just a matter of coming out of that comfort zone and just trying and putting in that effort. And when you get comfortable, that's time to do it again a little bit harder, stretch a little bit wider, right? Bring a little bit more fear into your life until that's comfortable, right?" And it wasn't in a preaching kind of way, it was just in a conversation with a little bit of information. And, she made me feel good with the thank yous and how pleased she was. And, right, so grateful that she met me. And at the same time, you know, there was that gift that she might not have recognized that she received, or she probably did recognize it. Whether she utilizes it or not, that's her choice, right? Maybe she will stretch in that because she got to feel that it wasn't so bad in the ask. Ah, there's one for me. That's a lesson that I'm always stretching on, is in the ask. Okay, you guys, experience paired with attention offers up gifts. Okay, you guys, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.